where truth and fiction collide. You're listening to John Christie. This is the intersection of Christianity and culture.
Got a great show ahead of you today. It's with a special guest of mine who is a former atheist activist. He got a little burnt out and he had to walk away from it, but he's going to come back and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what his next steps are, what it is that he was doing as an activist, what he will be doing coming up in the future, and we're also going to talk about atheism. Why? How can you be an atheist in a world so full of meaning, of purpose, of intelligence, of design, of beauty, of all these things that we recognize as God's power? But yet, there are those that don't see it. His name is Adam Collins, and we're going to be talking with Adam all about all of that. So let's jump right in and let's welcome our guest, Adam. Adam, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, John, it's nice to be here, bud. Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
So let's start with a little bit of your backstory and what it was you were doing in the atheist movement, in the atheist community, activism, and what got you there. You know, I mean, I'd even be interested to go as far back as to if you started from any level of belief and then lost it, or have you always not held belief? So what is your story, Adam?
Oh, man, that goes back quite a ways, like even since my early childhood. I was raised a hardcore fundamentalist Christian. My mom's dad was a Methodist minister. My dad is a hardcore fundamentalist evangelical Christian.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when my mom divorced my dad when I was maybe 2 or 3, she married into a family of devout Catholics. So I got it from all my mom's side, my dad's side, and my step family. So I was raised in the church. I attended as often as I could. I didn't see it as a burden. I saw it as an opportunity because I loved church. I loved going as often as I could. I was raised to believe that saving people's souls was my ultimate goal on this earth, and I wanted to save as many people as possible. So I took every opportunity I could to try to save people's souls, and I was that kid on the playground that people make fun of for. I was literally carrying a Bible at recess and preaching, and people would make fun of me for it. But I loved that at the time because
it was persecution, says, right?
The more you get persecuted in my name, the greater you will work.
Real quick, let me ask, where are you from? Where were you growing up? What state? What area?
I have lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, pretty much my entire life.
Okay. I was thinking maybe it was the South. You were sounding kind of like it might be the Bible Belt the way you were talking about it. But
I mean, it might as well be from as far as my extremist beliefs at the time, but no, it was always Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay,
so going through that all the way into early adulthood, when I met my first girlfriend when I was 18, her dad was the first person I ever met who was an actual non-believer. And he would talk to me about these kind of things like, how do you know that your belief is the right one? And like in my head, it was obvious. Like, of course, mine's the right one. How could you even ask that? because I never even met somebody who, like, I met people who really didn't like take it seriously, but never somebody who outright said they didn't believe.
Right.
So it was my goal to convert this guy, to make sure that I saved his soul, because I saw it as a test to my, not my faith, but as a test to, are you really going to help this guy and save his soul? So that's what I set out to do. I would study apologetics, and I would talk to people at my church, and I was young at the time and just trying to figure things out. And in my quest for truth, I would keep pounding away at arguments on both sides. And after so long of learning atheist arguments and knowing all the Christian ones from when I was growing up, at some point, I had to make a decision. Am I going to keep believing what I've been taught my entire life and what I've held so near and dear my whole life? Or am I going to go with what seems to be the truth? And since my allegiance always lied with the truth, it was a hard, long fought battle. But eventually I had to concede, like, this doesn't make sense. I've cried out to God. I've tried so hard to believe this, but it just doesn't make sense.
So was there anything specific that comes to mind, whether it was, an intellectual truth or a moment, like, was there any point that you said, like, this is it, this is the tipping point for me?
I'm not going to say there was one thing where I just went, snap, believer to atheist. It was a progression. And I like to think that I'm still on that progression. I still want to learn the truth. But I guess the main thing when I was younger, my biggest thing was, if God knows the future and he already knows who is going to go to heaven and who's going to go to hell, well, the people he knows that's going to go to hell, they never had a chance, really, because if he already knows they're going to hell, they can't go to heaven. They can't be saved. They're born before they're even born. They're already destined to burn in hell forever. And I could not reconcile. I could not have the thought that there's an all-perfect, all-loving God who knows that not just a lot of people, but the vast majority of all the people who have ever existed will end up in hell, and they don't have a way out because God already knows it, and that can't be changed. And that was the main thing. But since then, there's just been so much more. So
let me ask this about that. So did you grow up believing in predestination, that God has predestined those who, essentially all things, and including those who would go to heaven and those who would go to hell?
Well, when I was an early on Christian, I didn't really entertain any kind of atheist arguments, so I didn't deal with things like predestination. I just understood what was supposed to be a fact, that God knows everything. And if God knows something is going to be the case, it can't be changed. Like if person has choice A or choice B, and God knows that they're going to choose A, they can't choose B. It's an illusion. It's not an option, because if God is all knowing, then option B is just an illusion.
Well, no, I mean, okay. No? So the way, think of it this way. If when I used to live in California, I used to record football games, because the Patriots would always play 1:00 Eastern, which was 10:00 in California. And I would be at church on Sundays. So I would record the game, and then I would get home and I'd watch it, and I would do everything possible, not look at my phone, not do anything to know what the score was, what the outcome was, because I wanted to feel like it was live.
Sure.
But it was already done. Whatever I didn't or did know at that time didn't make any effect on the outcome. The outcome had already been sealed. It was just a matter of, did I know it or did I not know it? And occasionally something will happen, and, I'd have some jerk of a relative back here on the East Coast that would shoot me a text and say, oh my gosh, they got destroyed, or whatever it was. So then I would know, and it would not change the effect of the game. It wouldn't change anything that happened in it. The choices that the quarterback made, everybody made, was still the same, but I knew the outcome. So I guess that part of it, I'm having a hard time understanding. Other than, I guess, if what you're saying is, Well, and so if God knew, then why would he even allow these people to be created in the first place, or something like that? Maybe is that where you're trying to go with that? Because I don't see the connection between knowing something and being responsible for that individual's choice because you foreknew it. I'm not responsible because I foreknew that the Patriots lost. I'm not responsible for that loss in any way.
You're right. You're not, because you didn't predetermine that. But the fact is, if you're watching a game that's already over, then whatever you feel about it, whatever their choices are, doesn't matter because it's already done. And what you're watching, like if they were watching that game after they played it, maybe they would have made a different choice knowing the outcome of the choice they made. But it doesn't matter because it's over at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said predetermined. And I guess that's why I was asking about predestination, because there is a doctrine in Christianity of predestination, which means that God has predestined. He's predetermined all things. And basically we're just living out the effects of that. But again, correct. Those who will go to heaven, those who will go to hell, those who will, any event, it was predetermined or predestined by God. I don't personally subscribe to that. I've talked with a lot of people that do believe in predestination, and it's something that I find some serious flaws with. I do believe we have free will and that as a result, we make our own choices, but I do believe that God does know all things. And so he knows those choices. Go ahead.
God does or doesn't know all things?
Are you asking me if he does or doesn't?
I'm asking you whether or not you believe he does or does not.
I believe he does. Yes, he's all knowing.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If somebody has choice A or choice B, and God knows which one they're going to pick, let's say that God knows they're going to pick A, can they pick B if he already knew what they were going to pick before the choice was even brought to them?
Well, again, yeah, I guess I mean, I guess the answer to that would be no, because again, it's the event that occurred. It's like asking that about the football game that's already recorded. You know, could something change in that? Well, the answer would be no. It's been, the choice has been made.
Then I don't see how we're on a disagreement on whether or not it's predetermined. If God already knows choice A will be picked and choice B therefore cannot be picked, how is that election?
So I guess where I'm stuck on the predetermined, and I didn't mean to go off on this tangent. I want to let you get back to your story, but this is actually a good point, because this is something that's debated even amongst Christian circles, like I said, amongst people that believe more toward free will and people that believe more towards predestination. So to that though, saying the word predetermined means that God determined that outcome. And that's what I'm saying I don't believe. I believe the person has made the choice. God knows your choice from the beginning, you know, and this gets into, you know, I don't want to get into the thought behind time and whether time, it doesn't exist linearly, and we won't get into any of that stuff, but enough to just say, well, first, because it goes over my head. I'm not a scientist. I know enough to say a few things about it, and I can basically regurgitate what I've heard from Nova and, you know, different scientists on different PBS specials or Netflix specials, but I don't really know enough. But what I would say is enough to say that God, in his realm, he's outside of time and space. So he knows all things, he knows all events, he knows all decisions that have been made, but I do not believe he has caused all those decisions or predetermined those decisions to be made. He's given us the free will to make those decisions. He just already knows what we've decided. Does that make sense?
So are we not going to discuss that? Because that's an interesting topic. Do you want to go back to my background, or do you want to discuss this further? It's up to you. It's your show.
Let's come back to that, because I do want to give you the chance to set the stage, and we kind of jumped into the deep end right away. But let me do that. Let me make a note of that, and we'll come right back to that topic. Okay. All right. So go ahead. Sorry for derailing the train here, but let's go ahead and pick up. Was it your wife's or just your girlfriend's father?
It was my girlfriend's father at the time.
So your girlfriend. And he kind of got you questioning, and over a process of time, you kind of started coming to the conclusion that this Christianity doesn't make sense, and you wanted to, well, you take it from there. I won't say what you wanted to do. Okay.
So since I had met that guy, that's what had my springboard into learning the other side. Cause I didn't even pay any attention to the other side, because I was raised, like I said, in that hardcore fundamentalist background where you didn't give those kind of people the time of day. And like, they were just caricatures in my mind, because I never met a real life atheist until then. So it's not like I met this guy and read a few arguments and that was it. It was like a 7-year process. Like I had broken up with her way before I actually became an atheist, but it was a progression of about 7 or so years before I actually accepted the term atheist. And then when I accepted the term atheist, all of a sudden I found myself very alone, because I didn't know anybody else who believed the way I did, as strongly as I did. So I started seeking out people who did believe that way. And that's when I discovered the community of online atheists. I started listening to atheists like podcasts or watching YouTube videos, and I started going to atheist events that were local, and then more into that, I started going to conventions all over the country.
Let me ask you, what was this time frame, years wise, and what conventions were you going to?
I think my first one was American Atheist Convention in Des Moines, Iowa in 2011. That sounds about right. Yeah. And then as I kept going to some, I had found my people. So I found my community. So I started going to more and more. Like I was going to 4 or 6 events a year. I became obsessed with this community.
Now, let me ask you real quick, and I'm not going to be offended if you have no idea what I'm talking about, but are you familiar with my movie, My Week in Atheism?
Okay, so I was a truck driver for a few years, and I listened to Dogma Debate.
Oh, with David. Yep.
So I am very familiar with your movie. I was at the convention in Austin where you recorded that movie.
That's the reason I was asking, the American Atheist Convention. Really, that's great.
I saw it the day it came out. A lot of my friends are in that movie, and yes, I am extremely familiar with your movie, with you and David Smalley's relationship, who I don't really care for anymore, and nobody in the atheist community really does anyway. But you always seem like a really cool guy. So when I saw your Facebook post, I'm like, sure, I'll talk to John. He's a nice guy.
Oh, that's good. I appreciate it. David's a good guy too.
Oh man. Okay.
Well, let's go on to your story. So go ahead. But I thought that was interesting, because as you started mentioning the conventions, I thought, okay, what time frame are we talking? So that's neat to know. Thanks for filling me in. But go ahead.
Okay. From there, I just got more into atheist activism. I was kind of popular on Facebook with my posts and videos and stuff. I don't know if you looked into me on Facebook after we talked or anything, but I'm not as active anymore, obviously. But back in the day, I was. And at the second Reason Rally, I tried to get a speaking spot, and I actually started a petition to get me a speaking spot on there. And there's quite a few people who signed it, and then a few of the bigger names in the atheist community told me I shouldn't do that. And Matt Dillahunty messaged me and said, Adam, you don't want to do this. You're putting pressure on the organizers. It's not really fair. So I'm like, okay, what should I do? Because I was a truck driver at the time. I was driving all over the country. I couldn't do anything because I didn't know when I would be home to host anything, because he told me I should start my own event. So what I started was something called the Atheists of Facebook Online Convention. And it was all online. And as a truck driver, I could run the entire event from my truck on my computer. So I got speakers from all over the community. I did 3 of those. I started my own pod. Go ahead.
You would, I'm trying to follow this. You would do this while you were driving? You you would have a convention, or was it like at night? Like, how did that work?
I was the truck driver, so I was driving all over the country. So I couldn't make like a date for a physical place for a convention to take place.
Right.
So whenever I would be stopped driving for the night, I would be in my truck. Like I lived in my truck. I was a truck driver.
Okay.
So I would organize it during my off time, and during the actual date of the convention, I would run the entire, like I would take a day off, but I would be in a different state or whatever. But I could still run the entire thing from my computer in my truck.
Okay, I gotcha. That makes more sense. I was thinking you were hosting conventions while you're driving down, Highway 80 or something through Iowa.
No, I'm not that irrational.
Okay, go on.
That was just one of many things. I had my own. After I stopped driving the truck, that's when my activism kicked into high gear. I started my own podcast. It was called Atheism. That picked up a lot of traction. I actually did a couple speaking gigs at some atheist events. I would go to as many as I could. And I was talking to preachers and stuff around here, trying to host debates with them. They never bit at the opportunity to actually host a debate, but I talked to them, and I went to their house, and they had their friends come over, and we would have discussions and stuff. And there's probably a lot that I'm not thinking about, but that was my whole life. Yeah. Was activism. I was trying to right all of the wrongs from when I was a Christian because when I was a Christian, I wasn't just a Christian. I was very hardcore conservative. So I was very much racist, homophobic, bigoted in every form. And when I realized that I'm not bound by these rules anymore, I had a lot to make up for. So that's why I went to activism, was try to right the wrongs of when I was a Christian.
That's interesting. So to you saw the wrongs being basically, I think, your judgmental and condemnation of others because of their beliefs, their lifestyle, their choices, their whatever. They're not being Christian. Okay. That's it. There
are gay people who say that they're Christian, but in my mind, they weren't real Christians. But it's not because of their unbelief. It was because I was told by the Bible and the people who by my church that, gay people and people of other religions and all that, they're evil. So
they'll burn in hell.
Not just, they will burn in hell, and they're doing a lot of damage to the world. So I felt like I had a lot to make up for because I was so hardcore against them. I realized my error, and it's something I'm very ashamed of. I don't mind talking about it, but I hate the person I used to be. So I had to make up for that, which is why I went so hard with the activism for as long as I did.
Let me ask you a question towards that.
Sure.
Thinking back to that time, if you can go back to that person, I guess what I'm asking is, did you feel like you loved those people, or did you feel like you detested them or you hated them?
Well, I felt like it was my duty to love. It was the whole love the sinner, hate the sin thing.
Mm-hmm. But we say that a lot as Christians, and it's kind of a cop-out. It gives us an excuse to be jerks in many ways.
You're damn right.
And that's why I'm curious, in your heart, the way you felt, did you, because I have people in my life that I completely disagree with their lifestyles, and I believe if they continue in their path, they will be under God's judgment. But I don't detest them. I love them to death. And my hope is that they will see things differently. They will come to know God the way that I know it. They will come to know Christ the way that I know him. There's not a thing of me saying, burn you sinner, or there's no hatred towards them. It's genuine care, compassion, love, at least as much as I can express that I know. And that's why I'm just curious, at the time, were you in that position? Or because I do know many Christians that they're just angry at people for being sinners. That's the best way I can put it, is they're just filled with anger about how horrible of a person they are because they see their sin.
Okay, so back to my previous point that I was saying is that I knew it was my mission from God to save these people. I didn't hate. I mean, again, I was young. I had a very mature mind yet. I just had strong, passionate beliefs. And my beliefs were that my mission is to save these people. So when I saw somebody living in sin, which as hardcore as I was back then was pretty much everybody who didn't agree with me, I wanted to save them. But at the time, I'm not going to lie, I was a bad person. I like I said, very homophobic. I'm not proud of who I used to be. I was very adverse to their lifestyle and very vocal about it. Like with my activism, my personality is one of very extreme. If I'm going towards something, it's going to be 100% hardcore. So when I was a Christian, that's when I was listening to Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Laura Ingraham, Mike Savage every single day. And
you were a right-wing Christian.
Man, I can't express how hardcore right-wing I was.
Yeah.
I am a complete opposite person of who I used to be. So I'm not going to say I hated them, but if you asked me back then, I don't know, depending on the day and my mood, I might say that I love them. I just want them to save them. And sometimes I would say they're full of the devil. They love their sin. So I don't have one answer.
Yeah, enough to say you weren't feeling love for them, at least.
Depending on my mood. Maybe if I was in the mood, I was just compassionate and wanting to save, because I want them. I don't want anybody to burn in hell. It's preferable that they get saved and understand their wrongs and seek God's forgiveness. So I was young. I was stupid.
Okay. So you're driving around the country, going to every atheist convention you can, hosting, while you're not driving, hosting your own atheist conventions online. And and I guess what was the next step from there?
Well, I stopped driving a truck. Something happened to where I had to stop driving. So I didn't have the freedom I had. So I had a local job where I was home every day, and I had more responsibility to the job that I was at. And I was still an activist at the time, and I was taking time off work when I had it available to go to more conventions. But it started to wane down a little bit because I had so many responsibilities at home. And after doing that for so long, eventually I did get burnt out, because I realized I was doing this for so long, so hardcore, and I just eventually thought, how many different ways can I say that there is no God and religion sucks? Is this what I'm going to do with the rest of my life? Is keep repeating the same arguments with people, keep listening to the same message? What else am I going to do?
Yeah.
So then I went from that to more of a political activism, and I started running for office and supporting candidates who were more in line with my views to try to make the world a better place through political activism more than religious activism.
Now that's interesting, because I see that a lot. Most atheists that I know that are doing more than just being an atheist. They're involved, they're speaking, they're writing, they're doing whatever. Most, not all, but most I notice do. It's the same thing that you get on the Christian right. People passionate about their beliefs, people that feel they want to make the world a different and, in their mind, better place to align with more of what they believe, tend to find the next logical step is some sort of political influence, whether it's running for office, or now you're going to blog about it, or you're going to do podcasts more about the political persuasion. But they tend to go that way. And it's what makes it so interesting to me is because we cannot separate our political positions and our political actions from our beliefs. because they influence everything. They influence our day-to-day life. They influence our thoughts. They, of course, are going to influence how we raise our children, how we govern our cities, how we do all of these things. And it's, another topic for another day of separation between church and state and what that really means. And I don't know, maybe we will get into it. We'll see. I want to finish your story first. But what I find interesting about that is there's so many atheists that will say to Christians, stay out of the politics, keep your church out of the state. But yet it's doing the same exact thing. It's taking their beliefs and now influencing the state with them, their non-belief given, but that's where all of our beliefs lead us to because they're who we are. They're how we live. They're how we govern our lives. They're how we think we should govern a society, whether it's beliefs about God or beliefs about humanity. I always find that so interesting because it's the same path, two different polar opposite ends of the spectrum, but they go down the same exact path. You can comment on that or you can continue the story. Either way, I just found it interesting, so I had something to say about it.
Yeah, I'd love to comment on that further. To say that atheists say that Christians should keep their beliefs out of politics, but we're doing the same thing. No, sir. If it wasn't for the Christian right trying to legislate their beliefs on minorities, I wouldn't have a reason to. I wouldn't try to impose anything. What I'm doing, or what most atheists I know of are doing, pushback against theocratical tyranny.
Yeah, but that can be said both ways. I mean, because I can say from a Christian perspective, I'm pushing back on secular or non. I'm trying to think of a way to phrase it as because it's a position of an opposite end of belief, meaning should abortion as a great example. You can say the reason why Christians push so hard to change abortion laws is because there's another mindset, a secular mindset, that's pushing so hard in the opposite direction, making us have to stand up and protect the life of a human that's being destroyed and killed on a regular basis every day in this country. So it can go both ways.
On abortion, how about, let's see.
We've got so many areas we can go down. We're never going to get through your story, but go ahead.
I understand that the Constitution is a secular document and America was founded as a secular nation, or are you one of the people who think it's a Christian?
I would argue that this country was founded upon Christian-specific ideals. It's there straightforward in our Declaration of Independence. Now, the Constitution is a legal document, but it is based off of the precepts, the principles established in our Declaration of Independence. So I wouldn't say it's directly a religious document, but I would say that the rules that they chose to uphold within the Constitution are founded in the laws of God, in the laws of man, nature, and nature's God, as stated in our Declaration.
You think that most of the founding fathers were Christians?
I'd probably say I think most. I mean, I know I'm aware some were deists, but I would say as far as what we would classify some denomination of Christianity, I believe so, yeah. I believe it's evident in a lot of their writings even.
We should either come back to this or devote an entirely different show to it because I don't want to sound rude, but that's just so way off.
Oh, that's so interesting for you to say that because I don't even know how you can possibly make that statement. If you've read the Declaration, if you've ever been to Washington, D.C. and looked at the monuments and read the inscriptions on there, granted, they were chosen, but if you've read any of the writings of the founding fathers, how can you even deny that they didn't govern all their thoughts, all their mindset, that their laws, everything was based on there being a God, and that makes men equal because under God, we're all created the same.
Okay, are we doing this? Or is this going to be a topic for another time?
Do you want me to take a note and we'll come back to it if you want to finish to the burnout?
It's up to you, because I'm telling you, I was so hardcore in the atheist or the whole arguments on both sides.
Okay, let's do this. Let's come back to it. I don't want to just take the last word on it. So I guarantee you, we will come back to it. Let's get to your story of what changed, what happened that you stopped being an activist. Let's go there and see where that leads us, and then we'll come back to these. I am writing these down about the free will choice and the predestination, the Constitution, God. So I'm making a note of all these, and we'll come back to them. Does that sound good?
All right. So
there we go.
I switched to political activism, and instead of doing the whole atheist thing with the podcast and the conventions and all that, how many different ways can I say there is no God and religion sucks? So I started going towards political activism to try to affect some real change, positive change in the world. And I did that for a few years. And that proved to be very frustrating for me. Because when I was doing things like running for office or whatever, my Facebook, I don't want to say fan base, I'm not this huge popular dude or whatever, but a lot of people who were cheering me on, saying things like, go Adam, you're doing a great thing. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know. And please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. And everybody would tell me this stuff. And then when it was time to step up to the plate, like, hey, I need you to come to this event. I need 2 hours of your time to hold a sign. Or can you donate $10 to this cause for whatever reason, or show up to this event? Suddenly, they were too busy. Like, I would give them months in advance, and they were too, I can't find a sitter. I can't get time off work. I don't have $10 with 2 months of notice. And it got to be that people don't care. They seem to be armchair activists, and it sounds good to say, if there's anything I can do. And then when you say, okay, well, here's what you do, well, suddenly they can't be bothered. And that was so frustrating to me that I put so much of my time and effort into nothing more than trying to help people. They couldn't be bothered to lift a freaking finger to assist in their own benefit. I mean, and it would get frustrating, and I would back off from it and try something different. I don't know. I guess I still have the fire, and I still want to help people. But over the past couple years, I have been lucky enough to meet somebody who has become my everything. When I first started activism, I was single by myself. I just had all my time for me. But since I found this new person, we've since fallen deeply in love, gotten married, bought a house, and I guess you could say I've settled down. I've settled down, and I'm focusing on the life I'm making with my wife and our house and our lives together. And while I still have that passion and love for humankind, I'm focusing on the rest of my life just trying to be happy instead of trying to save the world.
So you're backing away from it, was more of a thing to just, I guess a better way of phrasing it, to enjoy the things of life, because it was becoming a drain. It was becoming a burden that you were carrying, or you felt, to some part you were carrying alone, and there was no help towards it. Is that correct?
Myself, and while everybody was cheering me on and wanting me to do good, it was all superficial. I felt like I was all by myself with empty support. And it just got too much. I couldn't see any results of my labor. I mean, there is some small victories here and there, but overall, it seems like the vast majority of people just can't be bothered to actually do something when it's time to step up to the plate.
Right.
They're all about right things. It's all great, just the thought of everything. But when it comes time to actually dig your heels in and let's actually do something, they can't be bothered. So I don't know. I've kind of that's what's burning out is the frustration of lack of support for people who say that they care but can't be bothered to actually participate for real.
What's so interesting about that is that I have friends who have been pastors. That is so the same story as to why a lot of pastors end up leaving, maybe not leaving the church altogether, but leaving the pastorate, stop being pastors, because the majority of people want to, in the church sense, they want to sit in the pews and listen to a message once a week to feel like they're good and they've done their duty or their part. But they're not active. They're not getting out in the community and doing things. They're not trying to help move the cause or, evangelize. It's, majority of the work, I think, I don't remember the number, but I always remember hearing, this statistic of 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. Maybe it's even less than that. Maybe it's, 2% of the people. I don't know. But basically the majority of the work is done by extreme small amount of people where mostly everybody else just kind of sits on the sidelines and maybe they'll criticize and tell you how you should be doing things, but they're not really involved in helping to do anything.
Amen.
I got an amen out of you.
I agree 100%. So be it, or be it, or whatever. So be it.
No, that's all right. We allow amens, even from non-believers. I'll take an amen wherever I can get it.
Well, here's mine.
So now, how many years has it been since you've kind of been out of the activism?
I mean, like I said, it's not like I just dropped out. Like even last year, 2021, I still threw my name in the hat and I ran for city council. But I had so much. Last year, I got married for the first time in my life. I bought my first house.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you very much. I moved way up to my job to where I'm the top guy running it. What I do now is I'm a manager at a truck driving school. So I manage that whole thing. It takes up all my time. And so I didn't really do much with the run for city council last year as much as I would have liked to, but only because I have too much other stuff going on that ultimately, not going to say means more to me, but is more productive to my life than it is to run for office to try to help a bunch of people who don't seem to really care.
It's funny. So I've never been full-time in ministry. There was a time, so I started out of high school. I went to a 2-year Bible college. My ambition was I would go into ministry. That would be my career path, because what else are you going to do if you're a Christian and you're going to Bible college? And that's pretty much what you're training towards. Either that or missions. And I didn't really see myself as a missionary. As I got out of college, my 2-year Bible college, I didn't like how close I got very active in the church now, beyond just the volunteer. I mean, it was still volunteer, but beyond just the volunteer aspect of it, and kind of getting involved a little more behind the scenes, seeing the business of it. And it really turned me away. And I've never been in full-time ministry because of the feelings I get of, to me, and I'm sympathetic. I understand why churches have to be run like a business, but I often feel like it's more a business that their business is being a church. And anyway, I won't go down that path, but enough to say I've avoided being in ministry. And I've had many people ask me, well, why did you go back to school? I went back, got a 4-year degree in religion and biblical studies, moved on to a master's degree in Christian and classical studies. Why bother doing all this if you're not going into full-time ministry? And while I can say that's a really good question, because I want to be doing something in ministry, whether it's this podcast or any level of teaching, speaking, I want to be there. I want to be doing it. I just don't want to be in the business of it, I guess, is my cop out, my lame excuse for not jumping into it full time. But I'm saying all that basically to come around to the point of, so I get that feeling of, not wanting to be a part of something that's just a drain, something that's just constantly taking from you, and you feel like you're not getting much return from it. And to back away and to spend focus time on family, there was a point in my life where I would say, I see my biggest full-time ministry being my family, my children as they were young, raising them, growing them. I was never the type to indoctrinate my children. We never pushed Christianity on them. I would encourage, I would find opportunities to guide them. But I would often say to them, I can't give you a relationship with God. You have to get it on your own. You have to seek him on your own if you want it, if you're seeking for it. And to me, that was, in a sense, my ministry for years. And then as they got older, and they're all doing well, on their different paths, some a little more advanced than others in different ways spiritually, but they're all good kids, and they're all in their 20s now, and they're growing well in that direction. They're finding their path with God. And now I kind of have gotten back wanting to do this podcast, wanting to do something of a ministry level, because it's in me. It's in, as much as I try to stay away from that type of stuff, it's part of me. It's how I'm constructed. It's whatever you want to say, but it's in my blood. It's in my bones, and I have to be doing it. I'm thinking you share a similar feeling like that. It's in you, and you're probably getting that restlessness at this point in your life because you're talking about getting back involved somehow.
John, you couldn't be more right, man. We share very similar parallels, but from the opposite perspective. When my son was young, I never, ever tried to persuade him that there is no God or anything. Like, if my family wanted to take him to church, if he wanted to go, I don't care. That's fine. If he wants to go to church, if he wants to be a Christian, I don't want to try to persuade him either way. I wanted to make up his own mind. Like, if he were to become a Christian and be a pastor, that might make for some entertaining or thoughtful educational conversations or whatever. It never took with him. Atheism didn't take with him. He doesn't claim either side. He doesn't really care about religion or atheism either way. He couldn't care less either way, but I didn't want to push him either way. But as far as my own activism, he knows exactly where I stand. He's been to conventions with me. He's been to church with his other family. But yeah, as far as the fire, it's still there in a sense, which is kind of the reason why I built the office that I did. Like, there was a whole empty space in my basement that I wanted to build an office so I could still continue to do some kind of activism. So I got this thing built. I painted an entire wall green for a green screen for video production. I'm going to set up my studio in this office to maybe start doing the podcast again. I don't know, but at least I now have the means to continue something. Should I choose to do so, at least the option's there now.
Oh, that's pretty cool then. So, but you said, should I? It sounds like you're going to. It doesn't sound like a should.
I mean, I have that fire in me. I want better for the world, and I have that extreme personality that's not going to allow me to just sit idly by forever. I mean, I'm still going to have some spare time, and when I do, what am I going to do with it? Sit around and watch TV? That's not me. I have to try to at least be active and productive in something, whatever my passion is at the time. Right now, I don't know. I mean, I built this office. Maybe I'm going to do something with it. As far as activism, I still have the option to run for office again. But as far as atheist activism, I don't know. I keep going back to that point. There is no God. Religion sucks. How many different ways could I say it? I don't know. I've been down that path maybe, but I don't know what else I can say.
Well, here's what I would say to that is that's the way it is, period. You know, and it's like that on both sides. It's like that, I think, in any line. I think even if you were a doctor, you would say, how many times can I tell people they must exercise and not smoke and not drink and do these healthy things, and they're still having heart attacks, and you would get discouraged. And as a Christian, you say the same thing. You know, you say, how many times can I try to argue the same points about atheism, about morality, about, you know, whatever, and I'm not getting through to people. No one's listening, and you get discouraged. Or an atheist saying, how many times can I tell Christians, you know, to quit trying to control our lives and quit whatever points it is, and they're not listening. I think it's like that. That's the way it is. But we fight the good fight, and I would encourage you on your side of it to fight that fight, you know, regardless of the fact that we're on opposite ends of it, because I do believe innately within us, and obviously I believe in design and God, and you don't, but I think you would acknowledge that in individuals, we all have this essence to us, and it's different in everyone. And when we find happiness, when we find true contentment, it's when we're following those paths. If we're trying to be something other than what we are, we tend to not be fulfilled. We tend to not be happy, you know, and marriages get destroyed because of this, because people try to be something else, or they give up their passions, or they try to mold to something, you know, and for us to be healthy as individuals, we need to pursue those desires, pursue those feelings, that, you know, us loudmouths that people don't like us at parties getting into the discussions of the things we talk about. That's what we do, though. You know, and those are people that throughout history have been very effective at changing the world from the front line. But there's others that have gifts and talents and passions in much more subtle or passive ways that they need to be able to pursue, you know? And I don't know, I'm just encouraging you and anyone that would listen, you know, is go after those things in your life, because you're not going to be content. You're going to be restless no matter what you try to do. You know, being on the sidelines, taking care of your family is a wonderful thing, and we need seasons of that. But at some point you're going to get restless and say, I got to get back in there. I can't stand listening to John talk about this Christian stuff. I got to set him straight, you know? It's kind of the way it goes.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. We are in violent agreement there. And you're right. It's in my blood and bones to try to affect change the best way I can. But for now, I'm focusing on other things. I may or may not get back into it. I don't know, living my life, enjoying it. I'm very happy where I am right now.
So let me ask this. If you were going to get back into it, if you something was given an opportunity, what's the number one topic or something that you feel like you would want to address right away?
Number one topic above all else?
At least for this time being.
It would be love for all of humankind. All this division, hatred, animosity. America's never been more divided, and that sucks. Because my basic whole life philosophy is to love people. That's why I've always done what I've done. I mean, I had a different perspective when I was a Christian, but it was still for the betterment of humankind. And I want to try to be a force for good in the world. And if there's any way I can help stop hate, division, animosity, tumult, all that stuff, and just gear it towards more unified love for each other, ultimately the world would be a better place. We can disagree fundamentally about religious beliefs or even some political beliefs, but overall, it's all about love for people.
So I see myself as how do I want to phrase this? I see myself as an optimistic pessimist in pretty much most things. And when you said, we've never been more divided, about 130 years ago, we literally fought against each other and killed many, hundreds of thousands in the Civil War. Even at the Revolutionary War, we had those who were on the side of England. I mean, we've definitely had our share of divisiveness in this country that I think is worse than we are today. I think we are a little narrow-sighted nowadays, where we think things are so bad, things have been, I think, pretty worse in our country in the past. And that's why I say I'm an optimistic pessimist, because I don't think we're in a good shape. I don't think we're going to get better. I think it's only going to get worse, just by my judgment of humanity, and what humankind trends toward. But we're not quite there yet. I mean, we're not up in arms against each other in a civil war at this point. I'm not saying it won't come to that. I hope to God it does not come to that, but we're not quite as bad as our worst moments in history.
That's fair. I mean, we're not at the Civil War where we're actually killing each other, one side or the other. Yeah, that's fair. I guess there's a lot more people nowadays, and I guess we have different methods of disagreement than we did back then. America is extremely divided, but to your point, not as much as a Civil War. Fine, I'll grant that, sure.
So with the love topic then, bringing people together, trying to be more kind, I guess, more considerate of one another would fall under that for loving each other. But you and I have very real differences. I'm assuming, based on the side you're on, the side I'm on, both spiritually as well as politically. I definitely am on the right. I'm not a hard right, but I'm definitely right of center, and I'm definitely on the Christian side. I'm not a hard. I've been called a fundamentalist by non-fundamentalists, but I've been called a liberal by fundamentalists. So I don't know where I stand, but I know I'm not the furthest right politically or spiritually. And I know you're not right, but you're left of center, and I'm not sure to what degree, but enough to say we have our differences. So,
I mean, if we're going to go on the spectrum here, I'm going to say I'm as far left as one can get.
As far left as one can get. Okay, so when you say that, then it makes me think. So you would wish for, or you would hope for us to be more of a socialist society, that far left.
Democratic socialism, yes.
Okay, yeah, socialist society. I mean, democratic socialism. It's got the word socialism. It's socialism. But so you go all the way to that side of things. That's interesting. Yeah, I definitely do not want to be a socialist society.
Democratic socialism is different than straight up socialism.
Well, okay, I'll bite. Explain that to me then.
Oh man, I wasn't prepared for a conversation about democratic socialism, but it's more for the people and by the people. And you know what? I'm not prepared to discuss that right now because it's not really what I'm focused on.
Okay, that's fair enough. We don't have to go down that path.
On the side, I lean more towards that than straight up capitalism.
Okay. And okay. So we'll put that part aside. We'll go to something more that we're prepared to argue, about, which would be maybe the effect of, I guess the point I'm trying to look at with this is, at what point, how far can our differences be, and we still can retain a love and respect for each other? Because at some point, my ideals and your ideals are going to smack each other in the face. And one is going to say, you're not being loving. You're not caring because you're saying, if I don't believe in your God, I'm going to hell. Take that as an example. And so at what point, how do you see that being reconciled? The fact that my beliefs state that whether it's hell or annihilationism or whatever it is, God is going to judge all living and dead, every person in my belief system. how do we reconcile that as far as in your statement of, wanting more love amongst us? Because you're not going to feel very loved from me if I say that the path you're going down is you're going to hell or is judgment with God, right? Like, how do you understand the point I'm trying to get to with that?
So, but it seems like you're asking me, like, what can I do for people who think I'm going to burn in hell and people like me? What can I do about that? And that's not my problem. If somebody is so hardcore about God is going to judge you and throw you in hell forever, what can I say to that? I guess that's what you're asking me. What can I say to that? And that's, I don't know. I guess I would, somebody like that probably isn't very reachable. Isn't going to listen to a message of love. There are a lot of things that Jesus said that I wholeheartedly agree with. And I don't see Jesus being the type of person to say, hey, you better believe what I believe or you're going to burn in hell. That's the person I used to be, but that's not me anymore. And if somebody wants to say that kind of stuff to me or people who I love or care about, then that sucks that they're like that. And hopefully those kind of ideals will die off as time goes on. But asking me what I can do about somebody like that, I don't even entertain that kind of conversation.
Okay. That's fair enough then. And I wasn't trying to push it in a direction. I guess what I'm just saying is at some point, where if it were easy for us to just love each other, I think we would be doing it. And I think that's why, when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest of the commandments? And he said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength, spirit, and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Well, technically those two aren't even commandments, but they're summations of what the rabbis would have known at the time as summations of the law. And if that were easy to do, I think we'd be in a much better place. But I guess the point I was getting at about the beliefs is what I was trying to find in that is, wanting us to love each other. It sounds great. And I want that. I think most people would agree that they want that. But the hard thing is finding out, how do we do it? How do we do it when somebody has a completely different ideal, a completely different mindset, belief system than what you have? And not only that they have it, but that it actually affects your life. It affects your, whether it's, more on the political spectrum of capitalism and socialism, it affects your money, your chances for opportunity, whether it's on the religious side, and it affects how your children are educated at school, whether it's for religion or against religion, whether it's, anything, discussions about what it is to be a man or a woman, and are there two genders or are there many, and all those types of things. And I mean, all of this again kind of gets back to that. That was why I made the point earlier about atheists and Christians being the same, as their political policies can be, I guess, both either an advancement of a belief or a reaction to another advancement of a belief. But they're all doing the same thing. They're all trying to get their beliefs, in a sense, passed as laws. And that's the part where I'm trying to navigate that, because I want what you want too. I want the love, but I'm very much a pragmatist. I deal with the practical and the reality more than the ideal of things. And that's why I said I'm an optimistic pessimist, because the pessimism in me says, yeah, good luck. That's a pipe dream. We're never going to get that love. We haven't gotten it in any human history that we can see recorded, and we're never going to get it. But I sure as hell would love to see it. That's the optimist in me.
Okay, well, here is my answer to that. My whole philosophy in life is do what you want to do, and as long as it doesn't negatively affect others, I don't care. If you're not trying to negative affect me, I don't care. I don't care if people go to church, if they believe in God, that's great. If they want to believe whatever they want, it doesn't bother me at all. if people are trans as far as genders go that you said, I don't care if somebody's a man or woman or if they identify differently than their biological sex. I do not care. If they're happy and they're not hurting anybody else, great. Go for it. I do not care. But once they start trying to legislate that two men who love each other can't get married, that's where I'm going to draw the line, because they are trying to impose on somebody else's happiness that isn't hurting anybody else. So as long as we're not trying to impose or hurt anybody else, I don't care how people do, as long as they're happy and not hurting anybody else in their endeavor or pursuit of their own happiness.
And I guess that's why we have the arguments in the legislations and the issues, is because, that sounds fine if we all lived in isolated areas. We lived on remote islands apart from each other. Then you're right. Then I don't care. In my mind, it's between them and God, whatever they do. And that's all. But we don't. We live in a society. We live in a collective community together where we do things together. We share things together. We go places together. We buy things together. We build things together. We're not isolated. And so our actions, regardless of if they're hurting someone, because that has to be defined. We're talking physical harm, we're talking emotional harm, or we're talking intellectual harm. That's where the problem comes in. And this is the battle, and this is the thing that I don't see how we resolve it and come to that love. All of us, can't we all just get along type of mentality? Because there's you and others of the opposite mentality of my camp have very strong beliefs on the way things should be. And they're in direct contradiction to my side and what we believe. And I'm saying this, your side, my side, to purposely put us against each other. I realize there's many in the middle in beliefs that go, center and slightly left, slightly right, but I'm just trying to be polarizing. But you know what I mean? It's these beliefs, they are on opposite ends. Again, both political as well as spiritual, as well as social. And that's the part that I'm just like, I don't see how we're gonna get that. The biblical model is of a monarchy. And studying classical literature, classical studies, the different levels of government. Democracy was, according to at least Socrates, was destructive, was the worst of all, because it would assume that a farmer has just as much say. Well, we see it nowadays that a farmer would have just as much say as a medical expert. Take Dr. Fauci, for example. Should we be listening to everyone and their opinion of what we should be doing about COVID, or should we let the medical experts decide? Well, in a democracy, everybody gets a fair say. And Socrates saw that as foolishness. Why should a hairdresser be able to weigh in on something of medical, or why should someone who has no idea about finances be able to weigh in on finances, or so on? Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. My point being is the model of the kingdom of heaven, the model of Christianity, of God, is a monarchy. Technically, it's a theocracy, God being the head of it. But it's not a shared opinion, because it says it's belief. And I see this in humanity. We can't come together. We can't come to the same agreements. We can't, because we're free will individual agents that we're going to do what we're going to do. And if you try to prevent me from doing what I want to do, then we're going to go to war, verbally, physically, something. We're not going to put up with it. And that's why I was saying, that's the pessimist in me, is I just don't see how that can, on either end, I don't see how we can achieve what you're saying of just let people be people, because we don't live isolated. And I don't see how we can ever come to that democracy of any sort. That's why, the best, I think, government that we know in mankind is what we currently have, which is the Democratic Republic. Because at least in that, we are saying we get some say but ultimately individuals are going to have the final say on what we do. And I don't know. Is that making sense to you, or am I rambling at this point?
Well, I know what you're saying, and that used to be how I felt too when I was a Christian, is that we're just not going to agree, so we have to fight against those that we disagree with. And I guess that's where small-time atheist activism comes in, because I used to feel that way, like you do about certain political issues, but I was able to get out of that. And if I can somehow spread atheist activism and convince other people that, hey, you got this wrong for these reasons, if they're willing to engage in dialogue and eventually see the error of their ways, I'm not going to change the world. But if I could change a person's mind or a couple people's mind, and then I've done a little bit. I mean, we're pushing towards that way. And if they pick up the torch and convince some more people, I mean, I'm sure you would agree that as time goes on, well, maybe you won't agree, but what do you think? As time goes on, the world, or at least our country, tends to become more liberal, far more than we used to be. And if the trend continues towards that path, eventually, 1,000, whatever years from now, it'll be far more liberal and secular than we are now. Incremental change, not right now. Everything changes to the way I want it, but affecting small incremental change eventually will make more progress long after I'm gone.
I think over the course of human history, we see it ebb and flow. There's times when, at least what we can look at as recorded history, in empires and civilizations, they've gone very liberal. And then there's usually some occurrence, something that happens, and then they go very conservative. Take, for example, again, my area of classical period, the Roman Empire became extremely liberal, extremely eat, drink, and be merry, do what's best and right for you. And, nothing was off bounds. Transgenderism, they didn't call it homosexuality. It was just following of sexual desire. But all of that was very, very much a liberal culture. And then after the fall of the Roman Empire, it went into an extremely conservative. You have Charlemagne becoming the first ruling pope, king. You have history throughout the Middle Ages of dominance of religion and what we would definitely call more of a conservatism. We even have up until, our recent United States history, the flow of conservatism and the Quakers and the Puritans coming here for religious freedoms. But this country was very, very conservative. And now it is trending more and more popular towards liberalism. And my hunch would be, I don't know how long, 100 years, several hundred years, 1,000 years, something will happen in society, in culture, in the world, and we'll trend back towards a conservative approach, because it just seems to be the way things go through history. We tend to ebb and flow between liberal and conservative. I don't think that we started out extremely conservative, however many years ago, and now we're just getting to liberal. I think we've gone through this before. And it's an interesting dynamic, because the one thing we definitely learn about humans over time is that we're not that different than we were thousands of years ago. We have the same arguments, we have the same thoughts, we have the same philosophies, we're seeking for the same things, and that's through different ways, through God, through introspection, through many different avenues, and we're not that unique nowadays than we've been in history. We're kind of par for the course. But anyway, so with all of that, if we're talking about doing things that, do what makes you happy, as long as it's not hurting others. where does that, I'm trying to not use a Christian term or lead you down a path in my questioning. But where do we get that fundamental from? Where do you get the basis from that? Where can we agree? Okay, at this point, you've done what's right for you, or what you've wanted, but now you're starting to hurt people. Where do we get that line? How do we start determining that? And I'm not asking for a specific where to, but I mean, in your mindset, how do we determine what is becoming harmful to others?
How do we get where we're becoming harmful to others? I guess that's when we legislate against other people's freedom or happiness. I guess.
Right. So let me give a specific example.
Okay.
I'll give a couple, so I'll progress towards it. So you mentioned homosexuality, gay marriage. Where does that, in your mind or in what you're explaining, where does that get determined that it becomes harmful to others, or it's not harmful to others?
Well, it's harmful to others when you tell two people who love each other that they cannot get married.
Okay.
I don't know how it's more simple than that.
Nope, that's fine. That's fine. So the harm in there is to the gay couple because we're preventing them from a union, from being married to each other. Now, at least in this country, I know in other countries there is different laws and rules, but at least in this country, I would say in that before, I'm not sure if every state has every state adopted gay marriage? I don't know that.
It's federal. The Supreme Court ruled on that.
I thought there was still an option of states, though. No, it's federal. Okay. So that's fine. So, okay. Sorry, that's my ignorance on that part of it. The states I've been in, it's been legal for so long that it's kind of been a non-issue as far as that. But anyway, so as I was saying, in some countries, it's illegal to be gay with death sentences. In this country, that's not the case. So you could look at that and you could say, well, obviously that legislation is extremely harmful because that's putting someone to death.
You would agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think most people would agree that at least would be a definition of harm, putting someone to death. But a question could be, but is it harmful to prevent someone from legally marrying? You're not preventing them from dating. You're not preventing them from living together for the rest of their life. And especially if they had a civil union and they could share medical and have power of attorney or, on their deathbed or whatever it was. So that's where the whole gray line comes into what really is harmful in that. And should they have the full same rights? Now we've determined that that's allowed, that's legal. Okay. Now, next up, and this isn't a slippery slope. I mean, this is actually something that is being pushed by a minority, but it is being pushed out there. Now you have groups like NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, that is saying, well, hold on. Why is it wrong for me as a 40-year-old man to love a 13-year-old boy, and that 13-year-old boy loves me just as much as I love him, and we can be together? Who's to say that that's harmful?
It's such an easy, I can't believe you're even suggesting that. We're talking about consenting adults here. Like there was the pushback against gay marriage, like, oh, what if somebody wants to marry their dog? A dog can't consent. A 13-year-old boy can't consent. I'm talking about adults who are in a loving relationship with each other. No, I'm not advocating pedophilia and that somebody who's an adult should be able to coerce a vulnerable child into marrying them.
Well, but hold on. There's assumptions you're making there. Number one,
gay people should be put to death. I'm not saying that you're suggesting that or that it's something that should be seriously. Just like NAMBLA shouldn't be taken seriously.
Well, now that's the point I wanted to get to, because I'm going to argue now I don't support NAMBLA. Let me be clear, but I'm going to argue from the standpoint of the arguments that have been made for same-sex marriage, for transgenderism, for identity, for children that are young, being able to take hormone injections and determine their sexual identity and whether they're male or female at a very young age. But yet we're saying, but they can't consent to a sexual relationship. And if they're in a sexual relationship with an older person, then that must be coercion. Well, it's not. If you read some of the stories from NAMBLA, it's not. It's consensual. Now, the dog, I understand that's dramatic effect, but we're not talking about animals. We're talking about humans. And as humans, as you know, the age of consent varies state to state. So that's just a floating number that people determine what it may be. And if you cross state lines and the age of consent is younger, you may be in big trouble. So it's not a hard, fast age of consent. It's a variable. So why couldn't the age of consent become 10 or 12 years old or 9 years old, or not have it at all and just make it so that anyone who desires to be with another person, regardless of age, can't be with another person?
Okay, so now you're talking about the age of consent in different states, laws and stuff, and I can't speak for all that. It's my personal opinion. Children cannot consent to a relationship. And if some child wants to take hormone replacement therapy, that's their own body and their own self. And I'm not prepared to tell somebody of any age that if they feel like they're a woman trapped in a man's body or vice versa, I don't get to make the call whether or not they can do that. That's up to them, the individual.
But you don't extend that same right to that same child at 10 years old to encounter a sexual relationship with a 40-year-old.
Right, I don't, because the 40-year-old is responsible.
But the 10-year-old is responsible too. I mean, they're responsible to choose their own identity. Why can't they choose their own sexual partner?
Wow.
It's a difficult, so the point I'm making with all this, I know I'm being extreme and I'm doing it on purpose. Well, let me have your say to that. I don't want to cut you off, and then I'll go in.
Well, it's like you want me to justify children marrying adults as equal to a man marrying another man who is a consenting adult. Consenting adults can do whatever they want within the confines of their own relationship, and I care nothing about that. Now, when it comes to children who are vulnerable, immature, and incapable of making those kinds of decisions, that's where I think the more responsible adults need to step in.
Responsible. See, this is where I have the issue, because responsible how? We're saying they're responsible enough to determine that they want to change the hormones of their body. They're responsible enough to say that even though my biology may state I'm a male, I can choose a sexual identity or gender of a female. We're giving them all these other responsibilities, but you can't choose who to share your sexuality with. That sounds pretty hypocritical to me. And the point that I'm making to all this is excuse the expression, but to me, this is the wackiness we're getting into in our society when we do say, let's do what feels good as long as it doesn't harm others. What is harm? Where do we define that? Because we don't govern our rules that way. We don't govern our laws that way. And the age of consent is a perfect example of that. We don't allow children to do things with their own body sexually because we're saying you're not old enough to know better. But yet we're allowing them to do things to their own body that involve their sexuality because it's their body and their choice. And it makes no sense to me. It's wacky legislation. It's a wacky mindset, but that's what you get when you feed the depravity of humanity, when you feed yourself and you say, do to me what I feel is right. That's a very dangerous way to live. And this directly brings us into our Declaration of Independence, because that's the document that we stated that we're founding our country on the belief that we don't do what we feel is right, regardless of harm or anything else. We do what is equality under God, the creator of all.
Okay, John, it seems like you're trying to equate sexuality and gender. I'm not talking about what a child can do with themselves sexually. That it seems like a weird thing to conflate. Like if somebody who is biologically born female feels like they're more comfortable as a male, has nothing to do with who they have sex with. There is a difference between gender and biological sex, and to say that somebody who's born biologically female and wants to become male, suddenly that equates to their sexuality and who they can have sex with. You're saying it's not a slippery slope, but I don't see how on earth you can say that. We're not talking about sexuality. We're talking about, do you want to talk about sexuality? Or do you want to talk about gender? You're trying to conflate the two as equal, and they're just not.
Let me state it this way. My argument is against autonomy. The right to govern yourself, right? Autonomy. I can make my own choices. We're saying that in some circumstances, a 12-year-old is allowed to make their own choices, but in others, they're not. And in both of these, the reason why I'm bringing them together, not trying to conflate them, is because both have to do with sexuality, whether it's sexual identity or sexual activity. They have to do with their body and what they choose to do with their body in a sexual way, whether it's, again, sexual identity or sexual activity. It's a way built around their own sexuality. Sexuality is more than just a physical thing. It's a psychological thing. It's many. So that's where I'm saying what we're doing is we're being inconsistent in that mindset. And the reason we're being inconsistent is we have no fixed foundation. We have no bearing that we say, this is what's right. We're just saying as long as it doesn't harm others, but we're not even defining what harm is. Does that make a little more sense, or am I completely whacked out?
I mean, I guess we've just veered so far off of what I thought the conversation would be. I didn't know that we would be talking about children's sexuality and all that on this conversation. So
I'm just going where we're going with it. We can pivot. We can talk, I was actually trying to segue this to our declaration, which we were going to talk about earlier, the Declaration and the Constitution. And in my interpretation, not my belief, I was going to say my belief, but it's really my interpretation of those documents of how our country was founded, was based on a fixed foundation of a bearing of God, that what is right, what is just, that we don't just do things that we want to. We do things that are right and that are just. And that needs a foundation, a fixed point to say, you veered off away from right and just to wrong and harm.
Okay, well, one thing about that, another thing that I've noticed about Christians and Christianity is that they claim to know ultimate truth and that God has revealed truth to them. It's just funny that you're not going to find two Christians that agree on every single thing, but they all seem to have this idea that God reveals the ultimate truth to them. If God is the ultimate arbiter of objective truth, why is there so much disagreement about what is truth and what isn't among Christians who claim to believe in the exact same God?
So I would say first that if there is a person claiming to know ultimate truth, they're naive. I think the more accurate expression for Christian, I'm sorry?
Does God not reveal that truth to you?
Well, but there's a difference. What I'm saying is we know first that there is ultimate truth, not necessarily that that's the Christian belief. Yeah. That Jesus is the logos, the ultimate truth of things, the all-knowing, all truth. And in him, we find that truth. So we know that the truth exists and that it's there. That doesn't mean that we always get it right. So as you're familiar with, you've been in activism, you've communicated, you've done public speaking, you've said things. I'm sure you've said things that you thought were crystal clear. I think this has happened tonight in our conversation, even, both sides of us, me to you and you to me. You say things and you think you're speaking perfectly clear. You think you're making perfect sense. However, what the other person comes away from the conversation with, you're left shaking your head saying, how did you get that from what I said? Now, that doesn't mean that I spoke non-truth. That means that person's interpretation or their processing of that information somehow was off. They got it wrong. They misinterpreted it. So I think there's a big difference. We believe that there is truth, and Jesus Christ is that truth, and his teachings are that truth. And there's more to it than that, but we don't believe that we have it specifically. Like, I know all the truth and I've got it all figured out that way.
Hey, saying we don't believe that it's a very broad statement, because there's so many that do believe that. Now, the differences between me and, I'm not going to say all atheists. I've met so many stupid atheists. Another one of the reasons why I quit the atheist community, because there's so many stupid ones of them. I'm not going to claim that I know ultimate truth. My beliefs are subject to change depending on better evidence. What I believe is truth is tentative based on what can be proven or disproven. If something that I believe is proven to be false, I'm happy to change my belief, because I've done it before. I was a Christian.
And I'll give you amen to that.
I'm just saying, I don't claim to have an arbiter of ultimate objective truth. And so many Christians do believe that they do have that, but they have disagreements. I can disagree with an atheist because we can both understand that we could be wrong. Now, again, there's stupid atheists who think some things that I think are ridiculous, but I don't think either one of us, or at least I don't think that I have a connection to the one being who holds objective truth. I could be proven wrong, and I'm happy to change my mind, provided better evidence contradicts my previous opinion.
Yeah, and let me say this to that as well. So, right, in saying we, it sounds like I'm representing Christianity and speaking for all Christians. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm saying from we is, we can go back for 2,000 years and to some extent see a vein of what we call orthodoxy, right? Standard Christian fundamental beliefs. And part of that fundamental beliefs is what I speak of as the collective we. Fully aware that there's other Christians that could disagree with me on many topics, but part of that collective we is that our label of Christian is because we believe that Christ has that truth. So that's why when I say that to we, I wouldn't say that we believe speaking in tongues is a phenomenon that's of God today. Some Christians do. Some Christians don't believe that. I wouldn't say that we believe there'll be a 3.5 year tribulation in the future with the Antichrist and the mark of the beast and all of that. Some Christians do believe in that. Some Christians don't. And we won't get into any of those things, but save those for another time. But all I'm saying is those are more fringe topics. But when it comes to the fundamentals, one of those fundamentals is that Christ is the truth. He's the way, the truth, and the life. That light leads us into all-knowing God, eternity of wisdom and absolute truth. That's the fundamental belief.
Christians that agree on every single thing, and that's so bizarre. If you have that direct connection to the arbiter of objective ultimate truth, why can't they agree on everything? If they all could, I would say, yeah, you guys are pretty consistent, all billion of you or something, but you're not going to find two Christians who agree on everything. And yet they are all convinced that they are right because it comes from the ultimate arbiter of objective truth.
But this is where I'm saying the agreement to be not only to label yourself as a Christian, but to hold Christian beliefs. Again, we've got 2,000 years of history that we can fall back on to say, these are those fundamentals. In the early church, not even the early church, once we became formalized churches and had more of a structure, we created creeds to define those fundamental truths. And those are that we believe in God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. We believe that our salvation comes through Jesus Christ and by no other. There's a handful of these fundamental truths that we hold. All of those, you're going to find that in Baptist as well as Pentecostal, as well as Methodists, as well as Catholics, many that go by the label of Christian. Now, again, my point to whether or not we should be speaking in tongues today, yes, there's disagreement about that. Whether or not we should be fully immersing someone in the water for baptism or sprinkling on their head, yes, there's disagreements to that. And the reason those things are disagreed upon is because they're referenced, they're highlighted basically throughout the Bible as side stories. They're B-roll. They're color to the narrative. They're not the fundamentals. Jesus was very clear about the fundamentals of the truth. He reiterated those repeatedly. Those are the things that we have to have agreement on. I can disagree with someone. I do disagree with many people about hell, about what hell is, if it's eternal punishment or it's a ceasing to exist. And we can still be Christians. We're still brothers in Christ. We're still both engaged in the same label and religion, belief system, family, but we have those differences. And those come because they're reading glimpses of what they can get, and I'm reading glimpses of what I can get, and we're trying to put the pieces to the puzzle together. Those are minute details. And in some cases, they may seem like they're much more bigger than minute, but in the overall belief of what it takes to be saved, what it means to be a Christian, we're in full agreement with that. Otherwise, you couldn't have the label of Christian. You go by a different label because you're not holding to those fundamental beliefs.
Okay. Is the Bible inspired by God? Is it ultimate truth?
Is the Bible inspired by God? Absolutely. Is it ultimate truth? I guess you have to define what you mean to that, because I sense a gotcha.
Well, I'm not trying to do a gotcha. Is the Bible ultimate truth or not?
It's ultimate truth on man's condition and need for salvation and the answer to that salvation. The reason I said a gotcha, I don't believe it's a science textbook. I don't believe it's an ultimate truth on how the earth was created, how many days it was created. I don't believe it's an ultimate guide on woodworking. I don't believe it's an ultimate truth on many things. I don't believe it's an ultimate truth on physics or science, like I had mentioned. But I do believe it is the ultimate truth on man's condition of separation from God and how he can resolve that, how he can become united with God.
Would you agree that the Bible says that gay people should be killed?
Yeah, the Bible says that, yeah. Gay people are one of the people listed in there. I shouldn't say that it says gay people. It says that those committing homosexuality, but yeah.
Right. So was God wrong when he said that, or should gay people be put to death?
No, gay people should not be put to death. That was given at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Why does it say that they should be in the Bible?
Because the part you're referencing to is under the theocracy of Israel, when they were governed by specific laws that God gave them to be perfect and holy as he's perfect and holy. Those are the Levitical laws that you're referring to, Leviticus 28, I believe, specifically.
Should they have been put to death back then? Is that your position?
Should they have been put to death back then? To keep, well, there's two parts to the laws. One was to keep with the laws. Yes, so should have adulterers, so should have many other law breakers at the time. However, they also had the chance for forgiveness. They had atonement, and they could go through the process to have their sins forgiven because that was the whole purpose of their sacrifices. The one thing we do see as a good example to this is slavery. We see the permission of slavery in the Old Testament under God's theocracy. However, what we see in Paul's letter to Philemon is the way it should be, which is, as Paul says to Philemon about Onesimus, the slave, his slave, he says, keep in mind, you should be letting him go free because you also have a master, and your master is greater than any master on earth. Yours is the master in heaven. And he's seeing how you treat your slave, and he'll treat you as you treat them. So it's all coming back around to you. And so what we get in this confusion with Old Testament laws is that we think that defines Christianity. That doesn't define Christianity. Christ defined Christianity in his Sermon on the Mount and in his teachings, where he was teaching what appeared to be the opposite of those Levitical laws. But in essence, what he was saying is those laws were given because you had to see how perfection would be and how you cannot attain perfection. You cannot be perfect. You cannot keep these laws. So instead of focusing on trying to keep these laws, what you should be focusing on is the lawgiver. And you should be crying out to mercy for the lawgiver to say, forgive me because I am not perfect. I can't live this standard that you're putting before me. I can't be perfect as you are perfect. And that was the whole point of Christ and the sacrifice. And that's why we repent of our sins and give our hearts to Jesus or ask him into our hearts. And we go through that whole ballpark, because what we in essence do is say, I can't uphold a law. I can't uphold perfection. I rely on you to be my sacrifice, my savior. You forgive me of my sin by giving of mercy on that. Now, Israel never sought for that. If you look through the Old Testament, all they did was either make vain attempts to keep the law in a unjust, hypocritical fashion, or they completely abandoned it altogether and did whatever they wanted to do. But they never sought for God's benevolence. They sought for the king. They wanted the justice. They wanted the eye for an eye. And God gave it to them to their destruction. Now, we can't just read Leviticus and say that's Christianity. That's not Christianity. Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism. That is Judaism. That is what God established to make a point, to show our need for a savior. Sorry, I'm getting into preaching and I don't want to do that. I want to let you talk too. So where do you want to go with that? I'm not trying to frustrate you, man.
Whenever there's a good part of the Old Testament, it's like, yeah, this is truth and this is ultimate truth and love and all that. But when something goes against what seems societally unacceptable, all of a sudden now it gets fulfilled in the New Testament and all that. Why do some Christians still hold on to those Old Testament beliefs? I mean, even Romans 1 speaks against homosexuals. It just seems so convenient that you have an idea of how the world should work and picking the verses that work towards your favor and trying to wordily justify all the ones that don't. Why can't it just be consistent throughout?
Well, because Romans is consistent with what I just said in the fact that it states that we, in our unrepented condition, are worthy of death. Right? That's basically what Romans said. Whether it's not just the homosexuals. Yes, he does label homosexuals, but he labels many different types of people. And the essence of Romans, if you read the first 7 chapters specifically, is basically setting that stage that we in our unrepented condition, in our condition where we're not willing to give our hearts to God, say, thy will be done, not my will be done, but give of ourselves to him and say, I choose to follow your ways over my own desires. And outside of that condition, our condition brings us death, not just physical death, but spiritual death. It destroys us. Following our own desires of our heart will lead us to physical as well as spiritual death. And what Romans is telling us in the first 7 chapters is specifically that. What Leviticus is telling us is specifically that. What Leviticus doesn't have is Romans chapter 8, which is the chapter that now Paul transitions to, but thanks to God, he has given us a merciful way out of this wretched body. The law was good, not because it made me uphold righteousness, but because it taught me what righteousness required and how I could not be it. I could not fulfill it. And as a result, I need a savior. That's what Romans 7 sets us up for. And then Romans 8 answers it with it's found in Christ. It's very consistent. It's the same thing. It's not cherry picking. I understand when you say that and you think I'm believing it's one way and then another way. No, the Old Testament is an incomplete book. It's a setup for our need for a savior. The New Testament answers that. That's why I said Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism. It answers, here's that savior. Go ahead.
Homosexuals, that you're born this way. This is what this is the way that you guys feel towards each other, and you're going to go to hell forever. But if you'll just beg for forgiveness and sprawl and talk about how horrible you are and ask for forgiveness, then you can be saved. Even though you're born this way, this is your natural desires, God made you this way. If you'll just give it up and beg for forgiveness for how you were made, then you can be saved. That just seems like a very shitty deal to give to somebody. Why would you make them this way if they have to beg the forgiveness of the person who made them that way? It doesn't make sense, John.
Well, it doesn't in the way you're expressing it. But if you look at it as a different analogy, if you look at it as you bought a brand new vehicle from a car dealership, and a week after driving that vehicle, you hit something in the road, a rock, a piece of metal, and it came up and it popped a hole in your engine, and you were leaking oil everywhere, and your engine failed. And you brought it back to the dealership and said, why would you make a vehicle this way? They would look at you and say, we didn't make it that way. We made it a certain way, and something happened to cause the condition to be faulty or broken. This is the story of the Bible. This is Genesis 3. We were created a certain way. Something happened. This was the Garden of Eden, taking the fruit, serpent, Eve, Adam, the whole story. And now we're in a different condition. We're in a faulty condition. We're leaking oil. We weren't made to leak oil. But now, not only homosexuality, we have pride, lots of pride. We have narcissism. We have all sorts of things in our essence that we could say we're born with. We were made this way. When the reality is we live, this is why I earlier referred to as depravity. We don't live in a proper condition. This is the Christian mindset. This is what I learned from the Bible. We don't live in a proper lifestyle. We live in a depraved lifestyle, all of us, not just homosexuals, everyone, every single man and woman. Now, in that depravity, in that crookedness, in that leaking of oil, we need to be fixed. And if we want to ignore it and say, hey, I was built this way. I was built to leak oil. Some people, I love Ford trucks. I have an old 1968 Ford F-100, and it leaks a lot of oil, and many Chevy owners will tell me that's Fords. That's the way they were built. So they would agree with that. But my point is they shouldn't be leaking oil. They need to be fixed. And that's the Christian mindset. It's not just for homosexuality. It's for greed. It's for bitterness, for hatefulness, for pride, for envy, for jealousy, for many things that we suffer and we're stuck in. There are people that are so conflicted with anger that it destroys them. It destroys their lives. It destroys families. There are people that are conflicted with drug abuse or alcoholism or gambling or many different things that trip them up, that harm them. It's not that they were created that way, but something happened in our human history to make us this way. Go ahead.
We're created a certain way. We're created flawed. We're created in a certain way that created flawed, and the only way you can get out of it is to beg the forgiveness of the Creator. If we're created in a way that's flawed, I mean, unless we were created perfect, but obviously we weren't, otherwise there would be no need for Jesus and his salvation. We're created this way, and then we're ordered, like Christopher Hitchens says, we're born sick and ordered to be well. We're born flawed, but we're required to seek fixing. I mean, you're talking about a Ford maker making a flawed vehicle. No, that's bullshit. God is the ultimate perfect creator and could create perfect beings. But did he have to satisfy his ego by making imperfect people to require his forgiveness? Am I missing something?
Yeah, I think you are. So what I think you're missing is there's a part to this that it's not as Hitchens, excuse me. It's not as Hitchens said that we're created flawed. We're created with the proclivity of flaw. Jesus was born as a man. Part of the importance of him being born as a man was that he could be sinless. Now, that coupled with, there's a passage in Deuteronomy where God says to Moses that this generation will not enter the promised land because they rebelled against me, they worshiped false idols, they didn't trust in me when I wanted to give them the promised land. Not one of them is going to step foot in the promised land. But their children, essentially, who didn't know better, they'll go in. And so this is where Christians get that age of accountability, is that there's this belief that there's some point in our life where we're held responsible. Again, back to that consensual thing. That's basically where they get the consent from. This comes, as much as you don't want to hear it, this is a law that does come from the Bible because it's based on this same age of accountability. But there's a point in our life where we're now responsible for our decisions that we make. We may have been born with a potential to leak oil, but it's not that we were born leaking oil. But again, as I said, at some point, a rock hit something, and now we're leaking oil. How we address that from that moment on is what God is dealing with in stating that you need to ask for forgiveness. Because what we need to do is recognize, I have an oil leak. I can't fix this. I need to go back to the mechanic and say, this is out of my control. This is what repentance is. I'm sorry. I mishandled the vehicle. I was careless. Please fix me. Fix my vehicle. That's essentially what forgiveness and repentance is about. But if we're unwilling to do that, then we drive down the road, we leak oil, our car blows up, and we shake our fist at the mechanic and say, why did you do this to me? You're such a horrible engineer or a horrible mechanic. That makes no sense. So I understand the dramatic effect that Hitchens has in that statement, but he's definitely misleading. Well, whether he's willingly knowing it or unwillingly knowing it, the statement's misleading because he's operating under the presumption that God did this to us and then wants us to ask forgiveness. God didn't do this to us. God made us a certain way. In the beginning, he created these things and said they were good. And then things went bad. It's the same way in our lives. Jesus came as a man so that he could live a perfect life. That insinuates that he was born without sin. Now, if we're born without sin, then we too could be perfect like Jesus. But we can't, because we have the human nature in us that says, I'm born in sin. I'm not born with sin. I'm born into sin, and I give into that sin. And that's where I've now created my leak, my oil leak. So.
Okay, so you started off by saying that, what was it? The original people with Moses, they didn't have a chance, right? They were bound for hell and didn't have a choice.
Oh no, I didn't say they were bound for hell and didn't have a choice. So the story is those that come out of Exodus, those that come out of Egypt,
Right.
God delivers them out of Egypt, brings them to the promised land, and says, here's the land. Now you're going to have to fight for it because there's people living there, but this is your land I promised you, and you'll have victory. And they said, no, we won't. They're big. They're like giants. We're scared of them. We can't do this. No way. We can't do it. And we're going to actually pray to some other gods. We're going to melt our gold together, and we're going to create a calf, and we're going to worship that. And we're going to do, and God said, what are you doing? I just delivered you out of Egypt. You don't think I can give you this promised land? Come on. And so now they're in rebellion in their minds as well as in their worship. And God says, you know what? You're not getting into the promised land. I'm going to make you wander for 40 years until all of you die off, and then your children will go in. That's the story. So go on.
So bizarre that he would have them in the promised land and have a conversation with them about, I did all this for you, and then he's surprised by their reaction. How can he be surprised by their reaction when he knew what it would be way before he even created these people?
I'm not following. So, okay. So you're saying
that he's talking.
Well, and I'm not certain that he was surprised by their reactions. He reacted to their reactions by saying, look, because of your non-belief, you won't inherit the promised land. You're not going in. That was the point. Because of their actions. I'm not sure about the surprise. It's just because of their decisions, because of their actions, their sin.
Yeah, he knew they would have those reactions.
Yep. But he held them accountable for them. I mean, this is what life is. We have our choices, we make them, and we're held accountable for them. I'm not sure where we're disconnecting on that.
It's that they're being held accountable for actions that God already knew that they would take. He knew what their reactions would be. He knew what their actions would be. And now he's punishing them for something that he knew would already happen before they were even created or put in that position.
But it's not that he didn't give them the chance to make that choice. Like, I don't understand the connection you're making between, because you know something you got to paint this picture a little more clear for me. Why is that a struggle in your mind to understand?
Okay, so before God created the universe and the earth and all this, he knew what these people would choose when he led them to the promised land. He already knew what it would be. But he created them anyway, knowing what they would choose, and then punished them for it. That sucks.
Well, okay, so what this gets back to, it's kind of interesting because you were talking about love earlier.
Yeah.
But this is a common, I was going to say misconception, but I'll just say it's a common dilemma that I deal with trying to explain to people, usually of non-belief. This all goes back to, again, one of the reasons why I don't believe in predestination as a doctrine, because we have to have a free will in order to love God, in order to love anyone. You have to have the option not to love them. If you're not given an option to not love, then you can never say you love someone. It's forced upon you. That's the way all this is. While God may know who's going to choose to love him or not, what you're saying is that he knows the end result. So don't even create those that wouldn't love him. Well, then they would never, this gets into Terminator type of circular craziness. Then they would have never been existing to not love him in the first place. So how would he ever know it if it was something that never happened? That would be an impossibility.
You're You're saying that he knew that they weren't going to love him, but should he create them anyway, even though he knew that they're never going to love him? Should he create them anyway, knowing that they're going to go to hell forever? He already knows. So they didn't have.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So you're saying then he should only have created those who he knew would love him, is your point, right?
I'm sorry, what was that?
He should only have created those who he knew would love him.
Well, the only other option is to create people who he knows wouldn't, and therefore would be sentenced to eternity in hell.
But if he
right?
this is where that impossibility factor comes in. I was saying the Terminator craziness, because if he never created those who he knew would reject him, then he would never know that they were rejecting him.
Isn't it better they not be created than to be created and be sentenced to hell forever, which he already knew would happen anyway?
Well, it's not giving of the choice of free will. Again, you're thinking of it as a predetermined thing, and I disagree with that. I'm not saying
he knows people aren't going to make it to heaven. If he knows that these people are going to go to hell and he makes them anyway, then they never had a chance. It's not fair.
It's absolutely fair, because you're given the same chance as anyone else is given. You're given the gift of life, the chance to acknowledge and know that there is a God and that your desire is to be with that God. That's the greatest gift anyone could ever have. And what you're saying is, so they shouldn't have been given that gift because they chose differently. Now, whether they go to hell for eternity, or again, it's a ceasing to exist, I won't argue those points, because I don't know. I don't know what the end result is. And that's where faith means that I know the benevolence of God, and I trust that in those he's making the right, just, perfect decision. So I don't worry what the afterlife is from that perspective. But what I do know is that the only option you have for eternity is with God. And so given that option, that's the greatest gift you can have. And to slam it back into his face and say, I don't want you, I don't want anything to do with you, then he will give you that. And whatever that may be, separation from God from eternity is hell, whether it's an actual punishment of, hellfire and brimstone, or it's, like I said, it's a ceasing to exist. I'll trust God to make that decision. That's beyond my pay scale. But
and hell was created for the people that God knew would reject them in the first place, right?
Because it wouldn't be an option. That's the part I'm trying to get you to see is to say I'm having a hard time putting it in my mind, because again, it's that Terminator effect. If he goes back and he kills Sarah Connor, then John Connor was never born and the Terminator never existed. And if God only could create those who would love him, then there never would be those that would not love him. He would never know of anyone. But the problem with that is God isn't in control of that decision. The humans are in control of that decision. No, I believe we have a free will. We're in control of that decision.
I just have such a hard time reconciling that. If he knows who will or will not love him, those who he knows won't love him can't love him. They can't do it if he knows that they won't.
But it's there. This is where this is the part I said I didn't want to get into, but let me say to this, in watching my Nova series, or different things where astrophysicists much smarter than myself have attempted to describe time, is the way that they say it is time is not linear. The only way that we get this linear effect of time is through gravity. Gravity creates this illusion of a starting point and an end point. We won't go into more detail about that because, again, I'm not the scientist and I'd love to have one explain it more. But other than to say gravity is what's pulling us down, it's killing us, it's deteriorating our body from the day we're born. And so it puts us on this scale, a start point and an end point. When in reality, with quantum physics and astrophysics and all this stuff, the way they see time is more circular or spherical is a better word. It's more spherical. It's all occurring at once, as opposed to linearly. So in that helps me to understand how God will know all things and know all results, but he's not actually causing them. So God is giving life to creatures, and he's giving us a free will to choose him, and then we're denying them. So in that spherical all at once time, astrophysics, whatever it is, what we have to see in that is it's an all-encompassing occurrence. It's all happening in a sense at once. And in that, God has created and something happened. Rejection. People choose to not be with him. So you're seeing it as this linear thing that's saying, why can't he just not do it in the first place? Now, I'll admit I'm not God and I'm not an astrophysicist. So I don't have all the answers to that, but all I can do is explain it from the best that I can see it. And the way that I see it is that he gives us all the choice. That's the most beautiful thing he could do, is give us the option, give us life and to love him. And if we don't see life as a gift, then I think we have other issues, that we need to deal with and wrestle with, because I think everyone, atheist alike, would even say, we see life as a gift. Whether you believe we're going to carbon at the end of this or whatever, it's a brief moment in time, but we're given it, and it's beneficial. Now, in the atheist mindset, you may say, at the end of it all, we die, we return to carbon, and it's over. No more consciousness, we cease to exist. I tend to actually believe, and I think biblically supporting it, that that's what the afterlife is for those who reject God, those who go to hell. I think that hell is literally the ceasing of existence. It's the second death as described in Revelation, and it's the end of all things. I don't believe it's a eternal burning in hell with Satan stabbing you with a pitchfork and demons tormenting you. That's more Dante's Inferno. That's where that comes from. I think it's more... Go ahead.
I kind of have to go, man.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. This, from an atheist perspective, a lot of Christians think that since this is all that we have and there is no God or no afterlife, why even bother doing good or anything? And for me, it's that's the reason why it's so important to do good and to care about your life, is because this is all that we have. Once we're dead, that's it. We're done. It's over. So we should make the very best of this time that we have, since it's so limited. We're given a finite amount of time to live and experience this world and this universe. So we should make the absolute most of it for the very limited time that we're given. And any time that you spend not living it to the fullest is a waste of the finite time that we have. So I want to live and experience and love as much as I possibly can with the time I'm allotted. And I appreciate the time that you've given me, John. And if we can maybe extend this further sometime, if you want to pick out some topics, I can be more prepared sometimes, whether it be transgender or democratic socialism or anything else you want to talk about.
That sounds good to me. No, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the conversation. I think, a lot of what you said, especially there at the end, there's a lot of beauty in that belief. Again, obviously we have some differences, and there's parts to this that I see from a different perspective, but I think the end result of this conversation is from the standpoint of you're looking for that good humanity, that love, that desire for people to enjoy this time on earth that they have together. And I'm not far from that. I'm very similar to that. I think it just comes down to I'm a little more minded of the afterlife and the benefit of who's giving us this opportunity to live together. But either way, I think this was a good conversation, and I want to thank you for coming on. I know it's difficult. We kind of hit this from a standpoint of let's just start talking and see where it goes. And yeah, let's do it again down the road. And when you get your studio set up, your better microphone set up, let's pick a couple topics and we'll go at it. Maybe we'll, set up, not a debate, but just, again, the conversation, but a little more prepared and formalized. So again, I want to thank you for coming on. I think this was good. Hopefully, it shows people we can have the conversation and disagree and still come back together as friends. So again, thanks for coming on, Adam, and we'll catch everybody later.
Like what you hear? Hate what you hear? Have some thoughts you'd like to get off your chest? We want to hear from you. Contact us at johnchristie.com and be a guest.